Good morning, good afternoon. We're here today to discuss the topic of deal execution trends, and for the purpose of this discussion, we'll take that as integrating acquisitions and separating divestments. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Joanna Tuplin to you. Joanna is a VP from GSK's Global Corporate Development team. So, Joanna, could I possibly ask you to provide an introduction to yourself and give maybe a little bit of a story of the journey that you've been on to become a VP in GSK's Global Corporate Development team?
Thanks, Mark. Yes, lovely to be here. So I've been in deals for about 25 years now. 14 of those was in KPMG myself in transactions, and subsequently in the GSK corporate development team. My experience has included small, complex divestments in Asia, but also some of the big separations we've done in GSK around Lucozade Ribena, and then the three-part deal with Novartis, plus the JV with Consumer Healthcare. I've also been involved in spinning out our biotech arm into a GP-LP structure, and this has culminated in my most recent transaction, which was leading the demerger of our consumer healthcare business and spinning that into a listed entity. And currently I am leading the separation and integration team.
That's great. Thank you very much, Joanna. We're just going to jump straight into some questions for you, if that's okay, around this topic of deal execution. So, Joanna, you've been, as you said, in GSK for 10, 11 years, involved in deals. How have things changed during that time in terms of how deals need to be executed within your business?
Well, our most recent and most significant change was July 22, when effectively we became a pure biopharma company, as opposed to a pharma and consumer healthcare company. And so we are now much more focused on integrating biotech acquisitions and growing our pipeline. But I would say that all of the years of those large, complex separation projects, we're really using that in the current sequencing of fairly fast-paced integrations that we're involved in. I think that from an integration perspective, being involved early is hugely critical. We're very focused on the preservation of deal value that an effective integration can bring. And I think as an organization, we're realizing the importance of that early connectivity between the deal team and the integration team. We're also trying to be courageous, because some of the acquisitions that we're doing, it's crucial to actually preserve the innovation spirit of that company. And so sometimes the strategy isn't fast-paced integration, but more of a leave whole and a leave outside GSK. And that takes a different sort of dynamic. It's a different type of project. There's additional risk potentially, but that's something we're very focused on, because in certain acquisitions, it's the right thing to do. And then on the people side, I think GSK is recognizing the importance of having a large network of people who work on integration separation projects. And one of the things we set up last year was an integration separation community, because I think that offering that group of people a community where they can come to develop their experiences, build relationships, and also build capabilities is really crucial, because it can be quite a lonely existence working on this type of deadline-driven project when you are sitting in, say, R&D or supply chain or finance, for example.
Great. And Joanna, that community is from people that are sat out in your wider business and would get involved in deals on a regular basis, or?
Yes, and sometimes on top of a day job. So one of the key aspects for us from an integration perspective is we need to take the leadership on an integration and mobilize that group of individuals very, very fast, and bring them in the right sequencing, and then develop this matrix team, bringing in leaders from each of those specialist areas, because the intricacies of R&D are enormous, and you need to bring in leaders from each of those areas, so each subject matter expert and their leaders, to make sure you've mobilized the core of an integration team. And the stronger our relationships are with that group, the easier it is and more effective it is to bring that together.
Great.
So Joanna, just expanding a little bit on that, and those of us like yourself who've been doing integration separation for a long while know there's a lot of published research that say on average 60% of deals or acquisitions fail to deliver shareholder value, etc. What's your own personal view about the big risks around doing integration and acquisitions?
Well, there's a lot. I would
Indeed.
say that transition from the deal team to the integration team, which I've sort of mentioned slightly, is absolutely paramount. And I think where we transition that knowledge and the diligence issues and have a really good understanding of the deal drivers in the integration team, it means we can better define what that integration approach needs to be, and also move much more swiftly after deal signing to start to think about day one and start to build that team. I think data is also becoming a really core topic, particularly in our space. You know, we deal not with just finance or HR data, but with human tissue sample in the context of clinical development. And so bringing that data across to maintain the pace of our clinical development and to ensure its security and it becomes under GSK leadership and governance, I think is really, really crucial. And sometimes that data can be stored across multiple different service providers. And so it's a mini project in itself to try and work out where it is and how to bring that across. I think with the nature of our recent deals, there's a huge amount about supporting employees as well, both from a sort of pure retention perspective, but also in terms of their experience and their employee experience. I think anyone would know that moving from a small biotech company that's been fairly nimble is very different to moving into large pharma, and supporting particularly the critical to keep employees, but also everybody as they make that transition is really crucial. And I think that for me, what I've learned is that the importance of leadership, because for me, I genuinely believe that the success of a project can be driven by having the right effective leader, and not everybody has the skill set to lead in the context of an integration environment, both with mobilizing a large matrix team, as I've mentioned, but also working alongside an acquired group.
Well, thanks. That's
great. And Joanna, this is something that I just wanted to touch on based on a point you made earlier about moving away from when GSK had the consumer health arm and the pharma arm, there was some amazing transformational deals that went on. Feels like as we're in more of a pharma world at the moment, that the deals that you've been doing will probably be you'll probably be doing more similar deals that are kind of more bolt-on in nature. Is there anything that needs to be considered there in terms of the difference, or are there any sort of different approaches, different skill sets, different setups that are required to do those type of transactions, or have you largely kind of covered that bit?
I think that what's critical with integrations is being able to mobilize fast and move at pace, because where we're bringing in an asset with a huge unmet need from a patient perspective, the speed of which we move from a clinical development perspective is key, and we cannot be from an integration team's perspective slowing that down. And so what's different here is, I think, the pace. It's very deadline driven, and also there's an alignment that's needed with the MDT, the medicine development team, to make sure that we are building an integration approach that works hand in hand with what we need from a clinical development perspective. Some of the other aspects around leadership and making sure that we have clear governance, I would say, run across both integrations and separations. Mm-hmm. But anybody who's worked in a large organization will know that good and clear governance is incredibly important. And what we do in GSK is we spend a lot of time with senior leaders ahead of starting the integration to help them understand what our priorities are and the deadlines, and then in turn they can unblock issues for us and make sure we have the right resources.
Mm-hmm. So Joanna, you've expanded a lot about the need for leadership and the various stakeholders you have to bring into an acquisition or an integration. Could you expand a bit more about what you're trying to do in terms of developing specific capabilities in your team with your people And also, what are you looking for from your advisors? Without being a loaded question to help us, how do you want to work with your advisors, and how can they complement what you're trying to do?
Yeah, sure, Tony. So I think I've spent a lot of time thinking about this last year, actually, and I think what we really need to have is effective leaders. And they are people who can lead very matrix, large teams, and who understand how to be nimble and agile and problem solve in that context. And it's not something you can learn necessarily through a certain pathway in the organization. And being able to judge what are going to be the critical issues, prioritize effectively, deep dive into a very complex part of our organization. So CMC that sits within R&D, for example, you have to know the organization very effectively to be able to lead. And I think that what we understand is you can't have a playbook that's going to give you that, because actually each project, it may be another biotech acquisition, but it's going to be in a different area of the science. It's going to be at a different stage of its development pipeline. And so it's going to have a different set of people you're acquiring with it. And so each project is unique. And I think we really need to be able to adapt to that and to be able to respond to that. And that's what I need from the leaders in my team. And I'd say that also goes with our advisor relationships, because what works for one client and one transaction might not work for another. And actually, the strongest, most effective partnerships that I've worked with are where we are partnering together on all of that problem solving and looking ahead and working out what's absolutely critical. And when you work with brilliant people on the advisory side, it's fantastic.
Thanks.
That's great. Thanks, Joanna. Look, not looking to delve into your pipeline for the next 12 months in terms of deals, obviously, but what are you most focused on it for the next 12 months? What are your key objectives that you're looking forward to delivering?
I would say a couple of things I've already mentioned. So just around making sure that we are focused on the importance of data and transitioning that safely and effectively, and also the knowledge transfer that goes with that, because when we acquire an asset in, say, phase 2, it may be several years before we're in front of the FDA, but my goodness, we need to understand exactly how that clinical development has come together. And so we need to make sure that we transition the knowledge very, very thoughtfully and carefully from the acquired group. And I also want to think a bit more about the people journey. How do we support people as they transition into large pharma from a biotech? And where we can really drive value is where we maintain the innovation, the knowledge base that we're looking to bring across to GSK, and that's a huge asset to us. And then I think making sure that I provide for the integration and separation community what they need to help deliver and be successful.
Fantastic. Well, Joanna, thank you so much. You've been incredibly generous with your time, and it's been great to get an insight into your journey, the way that you're working with your team, and as Tony said, the requirements of your advisors. Huge thanks from Tony and I. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanna.